Hey, it's Sound Advice from Barry. Now, usually in these segments, I'm talking to bands or sound people about how to make their bands sound better. In this segment, I'm talking to the venue owners who hire bands, and I want to give you a few tips as to how to get the best return on your investment when hiring a band. Hiring a band is a significant investment and a significant risk. So we should think about why venues hire live entertainment. Well, I'm sure there's some cases where the venue owner just loves the band and he loves them enough that he's willing to pay $500, $1,000, $2,000 to have that act come in and entertain him and his staff. And if any patrons come in, well, that's good too. But I think that's probably the rare exception. Most venue owners hire bands because they want to make money. And they know the band's going to cost them some money, but they're hoping that at the end of the night, when they count their tills, they've made more than enough money to cover the expense of hiring the entertainment, and it's drawn enough of a crowd that they've sold a whole bunch of alcohol, beer, and food. And that happens sometimes. Hopefully it happens often for you. Making sure that happens often has to do with some of the investments you make within your venue to provide a quality experience for your patrons so that your venue becomes known as a good place to come see entertainment and a comfortable place to enjoy the band, so the patrons who do come will stick around longer and buy more. I've got a few low-cost or moderate-cost tips that'll make your venue better for hosting live entertainment. First off, we want it to be comfortable for the act that comes in. Now, this doesn't necessarily directly correlate to profitability, but it does make the band happier. If the band is happier, maybe they are a little less stressed, they play a better show, they're more happy to come and work for you. And it's not very expensive. The first thought that comes to my mind is I've gone to a number of venues where the electrical power near stage is an issue. And bands have quite a few things they need to plug in, all of their guitar amps and effects and synthesizers and fans and whatnot. So they need a few outlets up on the stage. And if the band is bringing in their own lights and sound, that can actually draw some power. And so having those outlets distributed across 2 or more electrical circuits, so there's ample power available, is very helpful. And hopefully the circuits that are provided up on the stage aren't sharing loads with other circuits in the building, such as got some coffee makers or something running on those circuits back in the kitchen, because we all have to share the amount of power that's available and we need enough. So, for example, I would think it would be nice for most bands to have, say, 3, 4 position quad outlet boxes across the backside of stage. And I would think that would give most bands ample amount of outlets to draw from. Another thing that would be handy in that way would be to have some outlets right across the very front edge of the stage, because a lot of guitar players have various effects and pieces of equipment that need to be plugged in at the front of the stage. And so if you have outlets up there, that makes the wire runs a lot easier, faster setup, looks cleaner on stage, and it's pretty easy for the venue owner to set up. The other thing that I think is easy and important is decent stage lighting for the band. The band needs to be well lit in order to be enjoyed. And a lot of bands will bring in their own effect lighting, a couple of trees of lights and disco type effects in their lights and stuff. But it's hard for the band in that situation in many cases to actually light up the front of the band. That is, to have light coming up on the performers' faces, which I think is important for the audience to have an emotional connection with the show. Because the band can't really put light trees out into the dance floor area because people will stumble and trip over them. So the band is somewhat limited in most cases to putting their lighting equipment up on the stage with them. So it's hard for them to get that angle. But it's pretty easy for your venue to have some lights mounted in the ceiling in front of the stage. So from the front edge of the stage, I'd probably move out 10 or 15 feet toward the dance floor. And up in the ceiling, you could hang just some simple lights. Now, of course, you can put in tons of lighting and go as far as you want with this. But as a simple start, I would think about 6 par 38 lamp fixtures would be a good place to begin. Now, a par 38 is a pretty common light bulb that is a parabolic reflector type bulb. And you commonly see these lighting up people's driveways and so forth, outdoor fixtures. You can buy par 38 reflector bulbs at the typical hardware store. You can get theater fixtures, par cans, for the par 38s pretty inexpensively, starting at around $20 a piece. And so you could tack about a half a dozen of those things up in the ceiling with different colored gels in front of each of those par cans, and light up the front of the band pretty nicely. Now the next step would be to put a dimmer control box on those lamps and have a small control panel down near the stage so you can adjust how bright each of the colors are and maybe do some light sequencing and stuff. And that would be a really effective, cheap band lighting solution for probably a few $100s. You can go one step further with it, and instead of using incandescent par lamps, you could get par lamps that are LED-based fixtures. These LED fixtures can put out any color you want and are remotely controlled through DMX, the same kind of controller board. And so your audio lighting band store could probably hook you up with something like that for about $500. Now, when I say par 38, I'm referencing the physical size of the bulb. 38 is a number that, if you divided that by 1/8 of an inch, that would tell you how wide the bulb is. And those bulbs come in different sizes, of course. 38s are pretty much the smallest you're going to be working with. You could also step up to par 56s if you had a kind of a larger stage and a bigger venue and wanted a little more light throw. Par 56s run 500 watts typically. And that's probably pretty darn sufficient for most indoor applications, I would think. The next step up would be par 64s, which are bigger yet. But if it were me and I was a small venue owner, I think I would go with just a handful of par 38 cans, or probably more likely some of the LED lighting. LED lighting is a little more flat in its color, not quite as vibrant and rich, but it's low maintenance. You almost never have to replace those bulbs, and I don't like getting up on ladders. So that's where I would begin. You can certainly add more lighting for even more, but that's pretty inexpensive and would make a big difference for the bands who come into your venue. Now, the bands may still want to use their own stage lighting for effect, but this will be able to give them kind of a baseline front wash, which will make the band look a whole lot better. Now, finally, I want to talk about one more topic, which I think is the biggest topic of them all. And I'd like you to notice that I've got this really fancy microphone here. Isn't this pretty? It's great. And the reason I use the microphone is for you, because I want you to be able to hear me nice and clearly. And if I was talking to you in the room, and we were just sitting here having this conversation, and we didn't have to have the burden of this video interface between us, if you were just sitting here talking to me, you probably wouldn't be sitting this close to me, unless you were really cute and we liked each other a lot. And so why do I have the microphone so close? Well, the reason the microphone is so close is because if it sounded like this, you probably wouldn't stick around and listen to my video for very long. Now, right now, what you're hearing is you're hearing me on a different microphone that's about maybe 10 feet back. Now, if you were standing where that microphone is, I'd sound perfectly fine. But coming through the mic doesn't sound so good, does it? You can do this yourself. You can prove it yourself. If you take your smartphone, everybody's got a smartphone, right? And you just pull up the recorder application on your phone, video recorder, audio recorder, whatever. Put it on the table, and then have you and a friend step back away from that a few feet, not too far away, like, 5, 6 feet, and just have a conversation and talk and record your conversation. Now, if a person was sitting where that recorder was, he'd be in the conversation and he'd hear you perfectly clearly. But when you play back what you recorded, it's not going to sound very good, is it? Well, why do recordings sound so bad? Well, that's the wrong question, you see. The right question is, why do we think we sound so good? Okay, here's what's going on. What you're listening to on the recording, that's real. What you hear in your head, not so much. Now imagine when you see lightning striking in the distance. Been out, summer night, little thunderstorm happening, you see a lightning bolt come screeching out of the sky and boom in the distance. Well, you know that you see the lightning come down, and then a second or 2 or 3, then you hear the thunder crack. And that's because light moves a lot faster than sound. Light moves from the lightning bolt to your eye almost instantly, comparatively, whereas sound only moves at about 1,000 feet per second. So if you see the lightning come down and it takes a second or so to hear the sound, that means that lightning bolt is probably just a little over 1,000 feet away. Okay? So that means that sound moves kind of slowly. And if you're like me, you've got 2 ears, and mine are separated by about, I don't know, that much, I guess, and I've got some pudding in between. And because of that, when sounds approach your head, your brain, or what's left of it up here, is able to calculate the timing difference of that sound as it hits one ear, and then hits the other ear. And it happens pretty fast, sure, but your brain's able to figure that stuff out. And so if I hear sound come into this ear, and then a moment later it comes into this one, that tells me that it's coming from over there, right? Likewise, if it hits this ear first, and then it hits this one, well, that tells me the sound is over there. And so we got this like spatial ability to decode the sounds based upon their timing as it hits 2 ears, and we can figure out which direction the sounds are coming from. But not only that, our ear brain is an amazing system. It's able to hear all of these sounds coming in, which are coming in directly from the person talking or the guitar playing or whatever the sound source is. And it also hears those sounds as they come bouncing off walls and then hit us. And our brain is smart enough to know that, wow, I just heard that sound come in. Now I hear an echo of that sound just a moment later, and that echo isn't real, or it isn't important, I should say. And so it just kind of filters it out, and we're not aware of it. We don't hear it. We don't consciously hear it. And so our brain is doing all of this processing all the time as we listen to sounds to filter out the junk and just leave us with the quality sound so we can hear what's really going on. So that way, I can sit here and I can talk to my friend who's 8 feet away in the room, and we can have a perfectly fine conversation and hear each other just fine. But if we were to record that conversation, we hear it with all kinds of echoes and reverberation, which we don't normally hear because our mind has, in the background, filtered all that stuff out. Amazing, isn't it? So what you hear on the tape is pretty real. What you hear in your head, not so much. And of course, once it's on the tape and we play it back, well, we've captured all of the echoes and stuff, and we no longer can provide our ears with those timing cues. So it sounds echoey on the tape. That's the reality. So when we walk into a room that actually sounds echoey, high school gymnasium, for example, it's even far worse than it sounds to us. So what's the importance of all of this stuff, huh? Okay, here's what the importance is. Most venues are far more echoic than what is ideal. Your bar restaurant probably has a lot of tables that are hard surfaces. You may have a floor that's not carpeted. It's a hard floor. Your walls are probably straight and hard. Your ceiling is probably a hard surface. Most bars and restaurants don't have a lot of fluffy chairs and furniture and big heavy curtains. They're a lot of hard surfaces. Worse yet, maybe you've got walls that are parallel to each other and it's a big rectangular box. So when you make sound in that room, it's going to bounce all over the place and ring quite a bit. Some places you can obviously tell that they're reverberant. Others, it may not sound so reverberant, but it is. And so when you're in that kind of environment, your brain is working hard. It's working hard all the time to filter out all the background noise and not so important sounds, so it can focus on the ones that are important. And that's a lot of hard work, you know? When you're in an environment like that, you get stressed because your brain's working really hard. You might not think it is, but it is. And so that's the thing that a lot of venue owners overlook, is the acoustics of the room. And it's kind of unfortunate because venue owners, bar, restaurant owners, put a lot of effort into making their customers happy. They do things like buy good quality food. They have chefs who are competent and they make good quality dishes. They make it important for their staff to treat their customers well and provide good service. And these things are all important. They try to provide good food, good meals, good drinks at a reasonable price. That's important. But there was a survey in 2014 by Zagat of thousands of restaurant patrons. And they asked these patrons, think about the quality of service, the food quality, the prices, the location. What is the number one reason why you go to a restaurant and you decide not to come back? What do you think the answer was? The answer was the room acoustics. That's right. The number one reason why patrons choose to not patronize a restaurant is because they weren't comfortable there acoustically. Now, a lot of patrons can't articulate that exactly, but that's the case. That after being in the room for 30 minutes or more, they're just tired of it. You know, it's exhausting. It's not a happy place. It takes too much energy for their brain to sit there and process and digest all of the background clanks and noises and conversations and stuff. It's just not a comfortable place to be. Same thing for restaurant turnover. Your waitstaff, your bartenders, your employees have to be in that environment all day long. Do you want happy people who want to stay and work there and provide good service? Or do you want tired, stressed out people who have been struggling with that sound field all day long? It makes a difference. And same thing with the band. When the band is playing, the direct sound from the band or the band sound system sounds great. But once it starts bouncing around the room, it's really exhausting for the audience to listen to. And so this is the area, sound control, that I think more venue owners should pay a lot more attention to. And it's not terribly expensive. I would say for the typical medium small bar restaurant, $1,000, maybe as much as $5,000 worth of acoustical absorption would make a big difference in the quality of the band shows they have and their customer retention. And it doesn't really matter if a band is playing on stage or some other live event, or you're just playing the football game on the TV, or just trying to entertain patrons who are having a nice dinner, who don't want to hear the rattle, clatter, and conversations from all the tables next to them. Now, when pursuing a solution to these issues, it's obviously best if you can hire a audio professional who's got a good understanding of room acoustics and its treatment. But the basic solution, most of the time, is to just put up more absorbing material so the sound, instead of bouncing around, gets absorbed. And most typically this is done with sound absorbent panels. The panels are 2 inches to 4 inches thick, and they're filled up with a material like fiberglass, which is an effective sound absorber, and then they're covered with some kind of fireproof fabric on the top. You could fabricate these pretty cheap by just building some frames out of something like 2x2s and getting fiberglass without the paper backing, just pure fiberglass, and packing them in there. Maybe give it a spray with some 3M photo glue so that the fiberglass pieces don't work their way out of the frame, and then cover the whole thing up with some kind of fire-resistant burlap. It'd be pretty cheap, actually. More people more likely just purchase these things from various manufacturers. And a 2x2 foot panel is about $40. A 1x4 foot panel is about $50 a piece, depending upon the manufacturer and just exactly what you want. And when you're putting up these panels, you need to think in terms of percentage area of reflective surfaces that you're trying to control. So if you've got 10,000 square feet of surface and you put up 25 square feet of absorbent material, it's not going to do too much. So you need to cover a significant percentage of the reflective surfaces to have a effective amount of control. So you don't skimp out too much. And I would also concentrate my acoustic absorption up around where the sound sources are. So, for example, where the band stage is, I would try to cover most, if not all, of the back wall behind the band, and also the ceiling above the band, so that all of that reflected energy coming up and off the back of the band gets absorbed rather than hitting the wall and then bouncing back out into the audience. And then in the audience area, I would strategically place these panels to control the sound as well. And this could make a huge difference on how comfortable your room is for listening to live shows. And this is the sort of thing that will elevate your venue above the others to make it a place to see live entertainment. And it's not that huge of an investment. And finally, if you're planning on putting in an installed sound system, that is, speakers and a mixing board, and you want to provide sound for the bands, that's a pretty significant investment. I would estimate that for a typical small venue, it's probably between $5,000 to $10,000 worth of equipment if you want to do it right. And that's enough of an investment that I don't think that it's wise to go in blindly and just randomly pick equipment. The choice of loudspeakers you make and the positioning of those speakers is really important for how well and how effective it works in your venue. So I would suggest that if you're going to go down that route and you're going to put in your own system, that it would be a wise investment to hire somebody such as myself, or perhaps somebody from one of the local audio engineering stores in your area who has experience in, permanent installations and their setup, to give you some consulting to make sure that you're making the right choices when you buy equipment. Because it probably won't cost you any more in terms of equipment to do it right versus do it wrong, and you get so much better returns if you engineer the space properly. So those are some of my thoughts. I don't think that most of it is very expensive, but I think it has pretty big returns. And if you do up your venue right, you provide a good environment for the band and a good environment for your patrons, they're much more likely to be relaxed, happy, stay longer, and buy more, and you'll get a better return in your investment when you hire bands. Good luck, friends, and I'll see you in the next episode.